Coming up on Tech News Weekly, I, Mikah Sargent, am joined not by Jason Howell this week, but by Ant Pruitt. And we have a great show. First, Ant talks about Adobe Firefly. We have a brief discussion about where it is in terms of its competition with other artificial intelligence generative platforms and how Adobe may just be doing things right. Then Dan Moren of Six Colors stops by to talk about Apple Pay Later and WWDC 2023. It's rumors, it's predictions, and it's a little bit more about that Apple Pay Later service. Then our stories of the week. First, Ant Pruitt talks about advertisers leaving Twitter. We discuss why that might be taking place and where they might go. And then my story about a Wi-Fi protocol flaw that is something you should maybe be a little worried about, but not get too stressed out about. All of that coming up on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 279, recorded Thursday, March 30th, 2023. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your data and identity every time you go online with the #1 rated VPN provider today. Visit expressvpn.com/TNW to get 3 months free on a 1-year package. Hello and welcome back to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts today, Mikah Sargent.
And I am Ant Pruitt, sitting in for my man, Mr. Jason Howell.
Hi, Ant. I'm glad to have you here.
Hey, sir. How you be?
I am well. It's always a fun challenge, I'll say, to do the show alone, to bring on a bunch of different guests and, try to find some stories to talk about. But I always enjoy the opportunity to get to sit down with you and have a show where we can both share the spotlight and chat about what's going on in the world of tech. So I believe you are going to be kicking things off today with our first topic.
Yeah, again, you guys just love throwing me in the fire with gasoline draws on when it comes to this tech news. So I'm going to do my very best to keep rolling along here. But again, thank you for having me. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about AI. I know, surprise, surprise. That seems to be the topic of all of the shows here and on TWiT Network. But I wanted to touch on what's going on with the folks at Adobe. Just last week here recently, Adobe announced its Firefly generative AI platform. This is a platform that is now in public beta. Anyone can sign up for it. You just pretty much just need to register an email address with them and sign up, and you'll eventually get access to this. This is an AI generative platform that is set to not necessarily compete, but compare to the likes of Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, where you put in a prompt and the prompt will spit out some type of output, be it a image file, or even in Adobe's case, you can get text and fonts to be generated based off of the prompt that you enter. Very, very interesting platform. But as reported here on Petapixel recently, quote, Adobe Firefly is way behind. Is this a commitment is the commitment to ethics the blame? Now, that headline rubbed me the wrong way a little bit because they're assuming that what's happening with the platform with Adobe is just doing some things terribly wrong as far as how the output should look. Where I'm going to argue with you that with all of this being AI, everything that you put in for your prompt isn't going to necessarily guarantee the, quote, correct output. So as the story goes on, it talks about how Adobe built up this platform, and Adobe notably says, okay, you know what? We're not going to use images that we can just scrape from the public domain or what have you. We're going to use some images and assets that were submitted to us via our Adobe Stock program, which had to go through a rigorous check to make sure that it's not something that's already copyright protected. So in the end, this is number one, going to protect Adobe, because of course Adobe is going to do what's in their best interest. Number two, it's going to protect the users of the platform that may in the future use this tool to create an output, whether it be an image or font or what have you, and it not necessarily be subject to some type of copyright infringement. I love this. This is a great idea, but according to Petapixel and others out there, this is slowing down the progress for Adobe and making some of the output be a little bit wonky. They share some examples in here how Adobe struggles with certain phrases and doesn't necessarily give you exactly what you're looking for. At the very bottom of this Petapixel piece, there's a woman that's supposed to be taking a portrait of a man, and the images that it spits out are quite hilarious. The first image is literally the lady is like halfway hugging the gentleman, holding a lens in her hand, and the gentleman is holding what looks like a lens in his hand. That's not a picture of her taking a picture of a man. Then there's another one where she has the point and shoot camera pointed at herself while she's supposed to be pointing the camera at the man or whatever for the portrait. So clearly the AI didn't get it right in these examples, but I can attest that in my experience using this beta build for Firefly, it's been quite fine from the photography standpoint, or from the prompt standpoint and what it outputs. But I wanted to bring this up to you, Mr. Sargent, because again, ethics are involved here. First, there's the idea of the copyright, but then there's also the idea of, sometimes AI is just going to screw some things up. We've seen this in the public space with like law enforcement, and AI says, hey, that's a black man, bald, and we just got a report of a bald black man robbing a liquor store. Oh, go get him. And it ends up being totally wrong. But, there's certain biases in there because the AI isn't properly trained. And I think that's what we're going to be dealing with here with whether it be Adobe Firefly, whether it be Midjourney or Stable Diffusion. It's still going to take some time to train this. But the notion that Adobe is, quote, behind, I don't buy into that, because I think this is probably the right way to go about it, is to sort of sit back and take the long route, if you will, the long tail, and play the long game with this to make sure you're going to get this right and not lead to any other incidents down the road.
Yeah. And see, as you were talking about this, that's kind of what came front of mind. We wouldn't be saying that Adobe is behind if everyone had taken this approach of waiting and getting it right before launching. But because of the fact that we've seen now these generative AI platforms come out, and then we see other companies going, oh my God, we need to now do one. Google having Bard come out, and them having to partner with another AI firm to make that possible. And Microsoft realizing the potential success of OpenAI. So basically, investing a bunch of money and it's this rush. And so I'm not surprised, there was a piece, or rather, I think like an open letter or something along those lines, of a bunch of AI researchers and, folks who are paying attention to AI to some extent, all signed this letter saying, after GPT-4 from OpenAI, we think that companies should like hit the brakes and
do a pause.
Do a pause. Let's get this right. Let's not, because everybody right now is, it seems, rushing to get something out there to prove that they are up to date with the latest. And I understand it from both perspectives, from both sides here, because we as humans find a pattern and a sort of structure that we're comfortable with, and then it is hard to get someone to change from that structure, that pattern. And so if you are getting locked in with GPT-4 from OpenAI and using that platform in whatever way, whether it's Bing Chat or going to chat.openai.com or whatever, then having these companies convince you to move away from that is not going to be easy. And those companies know that. So they want to have something out there. But the problem is what you're talking about here, where it should be this slower approach. And if it was this slower approach, if everyone was kind of moving at this slower speed or this more, I guess, considered speed, then we wouldn't be saying that Adobe is behind, because as you know, you have pointed out, and as this article points out, they are trying to be mindful of search terms and biases that exist in the platform, and do a better job of presenting content that does not have those things as much as possible. And I respect that. I admire that. At the same time, I also understand that, you know, Adobe is a company that has a long history in the game. They can survive for a long period of time without needing to have this AI, you know, generative AI stuff going on. And so some new companies really do need to make that pivot and need to sort of get that underway. So Adobe has the resources and the runway to be able to take their time on this and get it right. It's something that we see a lot of the times from Apple too, because they've got so much cash that they can take their time and that it doesn't hurt their bottom line. So I guess what I'm saying is I applaud this for sure. I also understand, even if I don't necessarily cheer on the companies that are trying to make this happen sooner rather than later because they feel like they need to. It makes sense why they're doing it, but I do wish that all of these companies would kind of try to nail it before they decide to let it go out in the public, because that's the thing about this generative AI is it is generative. And so it is, like you can run away with it essentially, and just letting it go out there and letting it get run away with is potentially harmful.
I want to get a couple things out of the way. First off, I am an authorized Adobe affiliate, but I am not here to be an apologist for Adobe. Okay, so first thing. Next, they talk about the whole accuracy of this. Now, I'm assuming you've played around with some of the different generative AI platforms out there, and you put a prompt in, you hit generate, it gives you an output, and you're like, this looks like what I want it to look. You hit generate again with the same prompt, it gives you something totally different 99% of the time, right?
Yep.
So is that right? Or is that wrong? So it's not like any of these platforms are quote unquote perfect. I was recently on a podcast hosted by Dom Kamarechka and brought this up that again, it's not a right or wrong. This AI is still trying its best to learn from all of us what we put into it. And I like the fact that Adobe is trying to slow down a little bit. And on that podcast, I mentioned that what Adobe is doing reminds me of the smartphone generation of yore. Okay, so you remember we had all of those Android phones back in the day before the Nexus 1, and we had like the Motorola Droid and so on and so forth. And that supplanted the Palm Pre and the Palm Trio and all of that. And then BlackBerry was there, and they just sort of tried to just, stay afloat or what have you. And then later on down the line, Apple announced the iPhone. Okay. And that started to change some things. But then it got to a point where just about every time Apple announced something in the first couple of iterations of iOS, there was a competing headline that said, Apple just announced something that Android's been doing for 2 years. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So everything Apple did, there was always a competing headline of Android fans, Android users like, well, that's old news. We've been doing this on Android for blah, 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 blah. Right. And Apple was like, that's fine. That's okay. You go ahead and be first. We're going to refine this and make this function be even better by the time you get your hands on it from our product. And that's possibly what's going on here with Adobe.
Yeah, I do think that Adobe is taking that approach. And I think that given the fact that the company, again, has it's a lot like Apple in that space. It's got the resources to do so. So it can wait and it can get it right. And I think too, as you point out, this is a big company. And if they are going to do this generative AI, they have a whole, I mean, you just imagine an arena of lawyers who are all looking at them and going, nope, can't do it like
Right.
that. Nope, can't do it like that. Can't do it like that. So I get why they're taking the quote unquote right approach.
I'd like to also
definitely
point
makes
out
sense.
one more thing, though. Sorry for interrupting you, but I'd like to point
go
out
ahead.
one more thing about this product is you generate an output file, an image or what have you, and you go to download that file. Adobe gives you a warning, hey, we're going to tag in this metadata that this is not an authentic file. We're going to tag that this was created from generative AI, basically giving you like a seal of authenticity, even though it's not, authentic, to let people know that if they come across this online, they go and look it up and try to say, hey, look at this picture of the president of the United States in handcuffs. What did he do? If they look even closer, they're going to see, hey, this is not a real image. This was generated. I like that step. You don't get that with a lot of the other products out there right now.
Yeah, I agree. This is all so complicated and so involved and has so many kind of pitfalls. And so seeing a company take a measured approach to it, I think in the end is something that I celebrate for sure.
Indeed.
All righty, folks, we are going to keep plugging along. Up next, Apple has announced the dates for its Worldwide Developer Conference. So what can we expect? We are going to ask that question momentarily. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Companies, they grab our web history, our email metadata, our video searches, and they use that to create a detailed profile on users. And then they sell that information off to the highest bidder. Companies aren't just selling products anymore. They're selling us. Basically, we're the product. We have become the product. And that is the question you have to ask yourself. Am I the product, or is the product the thing that the company is making? To protect your identity and your data from these companies who are selling off that information, I think it's time to start using ExpressVPN. It's what I use. It's what I recommend. It's ExpressVPN, and you can use it every time you go online. Think about all the websites you visit: Facebook, Twitter, Google. Everything you do and say online is tracked. Using your public IP address, they can uniquely match your activity and know your location, and then have all that information come together. And then they start to develop a profile about you, and they figure out sort of what you're interested in, and they serve up ads specific to that. Or they, a company can then market to you specifically through different means. ExpressVPN makes you anonymous online by camouflaging your IP address and replacing it with a different secure IP of your choice. It also encrypts all of your data so that it's protected from hackers and anyone else that's trying to spy on you. And frankly, what we like most about ExpressVPN is how doggone easy it is to use. I've got it on all of my devices, and it's as simple as downloading the app on your phone, your computer, tapping a button, and you're protected. It is so quick to get going and so easy to use. I often forget I have it on because, along with being so easy to use and so quick to turn on, those are the speeds. The speeds are, I remember way back in the day, if I had a VPN, it took forever to browse anything because the VPN servers were so much slower. No, ExpressVPN, like I said, I forget it's on a lot of the time because of how quick it is. So if you're like me, and you believe that your internet data should belong to you and not to those greedy corporations, and ExpressVPN is perfect for you. I've got it, again, all over on my Mac, on my iPhone, on my iPad. It's super easy to go in and read about how to set it up on other devices as well. So if you've got a set-top box and you want to run ExpressVPN there. I'll also say that one of my favorite shows is a show called Australian Survivor, which is just Survivor, but based in Australia. And it's only available to Australians, but I may have figured out a way to watch that show and appear as if I'm coming from Australia, perhaps with the help of ExpressVPN. Protect your data with a #1 rated VPN provider today. Visit expressvpn.com/TNW to get 3 months free. 3 months free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/TNW. expressvpn.com/TNW to learn more. Thank you, ExpressVPN, for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. And thank you for protecting my internet activity. Appreciate you. All right, moving right along. Along with the WWDC announcement, I also want to talk about something that Apple recently announced called Apple Pay Later. Joining us to talk about these latest Apple announcements is Six Colors' own Dan Moren. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
Hey, Micah, good to be here.
Good to have you. Good to see you. Good to chat with you. I'll pretend like we haven't seen each other already twice this week. It's all new.
It's all new. No one needs to know.
No one needs to know. Don't look behind the curtain. Anyway, let's start with Apple Pay Later, because this was a service that Apple had sort of teased. And then even before they teased it, we had heard a bunch of rumors about Apple Pay Later. Apple definitely has kind of a big space now in the payments and financing game. They've got the Apple Card, Apple Wallet and Apple Pay, and maybe even one day we'll have a savings account. There's all this stuff going on, but Apple Pay Later is a very specific thing. So can you tell us, first of all, what is Apple Pay Later before we kind of dig into it?
Sure. Well, I mean, sort of at the top level, you could kind of consider it almost a alternative to a credit card, which is to say, if there's a purchase that you can't afford because you don't have that much money right now, say you need something and it's several $100s, you can break it up into installments and pay those installments on a multi-week basis. So you might say, oh, I've got to buy this thing for $500. It would be divided into 4 equal payments. You'd pay a quarter now, and then every couple of weeks you'd pay another quarter, which lets you sort of string it out over a period of time. Now, unlike a credit card, which oftentimes, if you're doing this kind of big payment, you'll incur interest charges. Therefore, you have to pay more. Apple Pay Later just does it straight up. There's no fees, no fines, no percentage or interest or anything like that. It's just divided into 4 payments. So it's all integrated directly into the Wallet app, which makes it really easy to use. And it's sort of treated a little bit like a loan, basically, right? Like, so you're getting fronted this money by Apple. And as a result, it does have potentially some impacts on things like your credit score, and other potential financial follow-on effects there, but it is something that might be a good option for people who don't have, say, an Apple Card, right? Because Apple already offers their own credit card. So yeah, that's sort of the big gist of it, is this way to sort of break up large payments into more affordable chunks. And it's not obviously the first company to do this, but because it's Apple, they have a heck of a lot of resources at their disposal.
So this is like a subset of Apple Pay then. It's not as if I can, because as an example, if you use another type of installment payment system, you can go to a website online. Let's say you go to, I don't know, Home Depot to get a gigantic skeleton decoration that you put in your front yard for Halloween. And I don't know how much those are, but let's say they're, I don't know, $400. And
I'm
so
glad
you're like,
you
oh,
said
I really
for
want this.
Halloween.
Yeah, exactly. Let me be specific. For Halloween, not for Easter. You want to split it up into multiple payments. You can go to one of those payment platforms, or sometimes they're even like offered right there in the pay section, and you can say, I want to finance essentially this purchase, and then many of them will do it in the 0%, no fees, and then it just gets split up. But with Apple Pay Later, it's very specifically called Apple Pay Later. So is it only for sites and services that offer Apple Pay?
Yes, it's built directly into Apple Pay, and moreover, it's also only for, I believe it's only for online purchases using Apple Pay. So you can't go into a store like your Home Depot directly and tap your phone on the payment thing and have it say, okay, you only have to pay a quarter right now. This is specifically for things that you're ordering online. But it does have that tie-in, and it also means that you can sort of see all your payments in the Wallet app and look at, like, when does my next payment due, how much is it, etc.
Got it. Now, with Apple Pay Later, is this something that everybody can I go buy my skeleton right now and get that Apple Pay Later option, or is this a rollout sort of?
First of all, I hope that you already have a skeleton. I think it's it's good. It helps you stay upright. No, this isn't available publicly to everybody yet. It is rolling out. They're going to start basically offering it to eligible users in the next few months. So I don't know. We haven't really seen the criteria for how it's deciding what people are going to get it, but it is a sort of a slow rollout.
Got it. And Ant has brought up a really good question. I think it's something that we talked about on Clockwise a little bit, the podcast that Dan Moren and I host. What if there are no fees and there's no interest? how is Apple, what's Apple's play here? How are they making any money on this? What is the benefit to the company if they aren't able to make money off of these sort of microloans?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a larger play for Apple, right? Apple doesn't necessarily need to make money directly off this, but what it does is it offers a competition to all those other existing buy now, pay later systems and says, hey, you can do it through Apple. And not only that, but like we're a company that you know, that you trust. We're not going to sell your data, right? We can make sure that it's going to be secure, all of that. And that encourages people to not use those other services and also potentially to just get more into the Apple ecosystem. And maybe they will start to look at, oh, maybe I need an Apple card, or maybe I need some other Apple, savings account if that ever shows up. Or maybe I just want to use more Apple features. So for Apple, it's all about having an ecosystem play where it's the more stuff they can offer within their own ecosystem prevents you from having to go out and use competitors' products.
Yeah, and I think sometimes folks forget too that the prices we're seeing in stores are not the cost that the store has paid for the item, and are not the sort of money that is truly available to the store after you make the purchase. Because with every single purchase that's made, depending on how, the deals that they have in place, they're ending up paying money to MasterCard or Visa, or like every single payment has all these little charges and fees. And so there's an opportunity there as well for Apple to make some money depending on how you are going through and doing the payment.
Right. Driving more payment to Apple Pay will, in the end, benefit them a little bit financially as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And lastly, something that I found interesting, could you tell us about how Apple is sort of splitting up the responsibilities of this? There are several companies that are involved in the creation of Apple Pay Later, including a subsidiary of Apple, right?
Right. Yeah. So Apple has a subsidiary called Apple Financing LLC, which is basically does the credit assessment and the lending itself. And then we'll also deal with the reporting to the relevant credit bureaus and stuff like that. But this is also because it's using a credit card infrastructure to make these payments, right? You're using Apple Pay, you're buying something online, there has to be a transaction system. So that's being backed by MasterCard, which has its own installments program. So the nice part about that for people who are merchants accepting Apple Pay, they don't have to do anything specific to allow for Apple Pay Later. As long as they accept Apple Pay, it's totally fine. And then finally, you get Goldman Sachs as well, which is basically the issuer of the MasterCard payment credential. Goldman Sachs obviously works with Apple on the Apple Card too. So that's sort of providing some of the financial infrastructure as well.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you for explaining that. Let us talk a little bit about WWDC. So Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference takes place this year, June 5th through June 9th. For folks who don't know what WWDC is, what is this event typically about? And why is it, folks might be aware that Apple hosts these or holds these online product announcements, but those are usually just 1 hour or maybe at the most 2 hours. And then everybody goes away after that. This is a multi-day event that takes place every year. What's it for?
Yeah, so this is sort of the big event of the Apple calendar. This is Apple laying out its roadmap for the year to come, and it's going to talk specifically about updates to its software platform. So macOS, iOS, iPadOS, tvOS, watchOS, all of those things generally get new features. There's a whole bunch of, all these sessions that are basically aimed mainly at developers, people writing apps for Apple's platforms, telling them how to take advantage of all these new features and, basically allowing them to ask questions for Apple engineers and help work on their apps. It also does often have, announcements of hardware or new products. But the software platforms and the updates to them are really the highlight of this for a lot of people.
Got it. Yeah. And I mean, that is the sort of main event that'll take place on June 5th. Now, there are, of course, already, although it's not even April yet, lots of rumors surrounding what Apple could announce at WWDC. So can you give us kind of your insights into what we might expect, what we shouldn't expect even, and what we could expect?
Yeah. So, I mean, other than, of course, the updates to the platforms, right? Like we should basically expect iOS 17, macOS 14, all these various, sort of the next year's worth of updates. What those contain, it's unclear. There's been some back and forth talking about how significant these updates will be this year. And a big part of that is because the major thing that we're rumored to see come out of this is Apple's virtual reality, augmented reality headset, basically this thing that they've been rumored to have been working on for years now. That will be sort of a competitor with products from Meta or Sony with the PlayStation VR 2. So whatever Apple is doing in that space is expected to sort of be the marquee sort of announcement here and suck up a lot of the oxygen out of the room. And I think that'll be really interesting to see because it's not only a big product, but it's a whole new platform for them on the level of something like iOS and macOS. So expect to see something about that. What exactly it is, we don't know. That's mainly been the province of rumors to date.
What might it entail? Yeah, I've even seen some later rumors about potentially not seeing that announced.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We'll see.
In terms of the next versions of iOS, iPadOS, and all of the OSs, are we? Are there any sort of marquee features, big things that folks have been talking about Apple missing, or do we think this is going to be one of those sort of iterative updates overall where it's a lot of bug fixing, a lot of security patches, and maybe a few little changes here and there, as opposed to sort of a complete rethink or overhaul as we've seen in some past WWDCs?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect any major overhauls this year. I mean, it sounds like development of the headset product, even if it doesn't show up this year, has really taken up a lot of Apple's R&D efforts. So what we probably expect to see on the platform updates are things that are on the smaller side, some bug fixes, some minor feature updates. It's sort of been described as a bunch of sort of nice to have features, but probably nothing quite on the level of the big announcements we've seen in the past couple of years. Things like iOS's brand new lock screen or iPadOS's stage manager. I don't think we'll even see things of that magnitude this year around. I think we might see some refinements to existing systems, which hopefully will help plug a lot of gaps for users who have been dissatisfied with them. But look for something a little bit more modest this year.
All right. Well, Dan Moren, it is always a pleasure to get to chat with you and have you explain what's going on in the world of Apple. Of course, folks can head to sixcolors.com to check out the work that you're doing. But if they want to follow you online, perhaps on Mastodon and or Twitter, where should they go to do so?
Yeah, I'm mostly pretty active on Mastodon these days at zeppelin.flights. I'm at D Moren there. You can find me at Six Colors and, of course, over on Relay FM, where I host the Clockwise podcast with Mikah every week. As well as a bunch of other stuff I do, which you can find over at dmoren.com.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Mikah.
All right. Coming up, we're going to get into my story of the week featuring another popular item that we talk about here on the network. It's not AI, but it is Twitter. All right. We're back. So, Mr. Sargent, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about my particular story of the week. And we're going to dive into the world of Twitter again. Not necessarily Elon Musk, but partially Elon Musk. But I want to touch on this issue going on with Twitter. So here at TWiT, Twitter has a bit of a love-hate relationship as far as the user base here. People, they have their own opinions about how they use it or if they even use it at all. And but again, that is just a tiny bubble within a bubble here in Silicon Valley. That doesn't necessarily equate to the masses out there because Twitter is such a huge social media platform. Now, since Elon Musk has gained control of Twitter, it has gone from a platform that was known to be a bit of a free-for-all to say whatever the heck you wanted to say to anybody, whenever you wanted to say it, to a bigger free-for-all of saying whatever the heck you want to say to whoever and whenever you want to say it. Now, granted, Musk has promised some changes for the platform to help, with hate speech and things of that nature and all of the bots and spam and things like that. He has promised that. But we're not necessarily seeing any changes on that front. At least I can't say that I am. I'm not going to speak for you. But what's happening is a lot of the users are talking about or have already done a bit of an exodus. You know, they're talking about, okay, I'm going to leave Twitter, and they're just gone. And then there's other folks that are doing a bit of a strategy because they don't necessarily want to leave the community that they built with Twitter. So they're trying to, you know, work up a way to get on a different platform and take their community with them, if you will. That also has been affecting advertisers out there. And I found this interesting because advertisers, they want to be on a platform where there's a bunch of eyeballs. Twitter has a gazillion daily active users, a gazillion monthly active users. That's one thing that Musk continues to brag about. But advertisers, for whatever reason, have been quite against what Musk has brought to the table, be it things from corporate morale or just his mode of operation or even just his personality in general. I think some folks just really take it personal. And I don't know if that's fair, but that's their prerogative and say, you know what, we don't want to advertise on that platform. We don't want to be associated with Elon Musk. We don't want to be associated with the quote unquote cesspool, if you will, of Twitter. And that's fine. Now, according to the story here on Vox.com, more than half of Twitter's top 1,000 advertisers before the acquisition have stopped advertising on the platform as of February. This is coming from the analysis firm Pathmatics. Out of Twitter's top 10 advertisers pre-acquisition, only 6 still advertise on the platform. That's crazy. That's crazy. Now, again, Mr. Sargent, there's a lot of eyeballs on Twitter. Why wouldn't someone want to be there and advertise if it could potentially make more money? Because if you go to Twitter right now and search for, say, ABC News, they're there. Search for NBC News, they're there. Okay, they're news platforms, right? I get it. What about brands? Search for Nike, they're there. Search for Apple. Apple's not there. They're listed, but there's no tweets there. But if you search for Tim Cook, he's there and he's tweeting. It's fine for them. What is it that says, you know what? Nah, we don't want to fool with Twitter like that. But yet we will probably go ahead and advertise on Facebook or advertise on Instagram, which all of those platforms have the same problems, sans having the problem, or not problem, the association of Elon Musk. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that in a lot of ways, it's always a balancing act. And so, yeah, and it's a balance. It's like a 4D balancing act when I think about it, because there are multiple aspects of balance here. We've got, does the place where we're advertising make us so much money that we really just have to be there? Or does it not make us enough money and so we don't want to be there? And that's sort of, it's like how much money it makes us. That's one balancing act. And then on the other side of things, you've got, does the potential for being on the platform damage our reputation in such a way that it affects our bottom line? And that's like a yes or no balancing kind of game there, how much it could affect our reputation from being there. And so I think that, you know, if I'm trying to, let's say the Super Bowl, for example. And of course, companies are paying a lot of money to be on the Super Bowl, so it's not exactly perfect for this sort of metaphor that I'm going for. But
in your defense, people do boycott the NFL for a lot of different reasons as well. So
but see, and even though those boycotts are going on, many a company, including Apple, still is sponsoring the Super Bowl. So that is a time where being part of the Super Bowl makes them enough money and potentially gets, you know, more customers, that it outweighs those other concerns. But with Twitter, how a lot of times the tweet, the advertisement that's taking place on Twitter, it's just a branding play. It's not often like tap here to get started or tap here and save 30% off your first. It's not usually that kind of thing. It's usually just an awareness play. And so the companies aren't putting so much of their effort into Twitter like they are, where it's actually valuable to them in such a way that they, can't help but be on the platform. So then it's like, if I very loudly say I'm getting off of Twitter, not using Twitter, and participating in this sort of overall boycott of the platform, is that going to earn me more points? Is that going to get me more value than I would if I was on the platform? So I really think it's 4D or 3D chess, whatever it is. It's a lot of different aspects at play at once that make it so that some companies choose to advertise there while some choose to not advertise there. And there's always that risk. The companies are, I think the reason why some companies are choosing not to be there is because there is a risk that your ad is here and then right below it is some horribly racist thing that a person has said, and then that gets screenshotted and shared across the entire platform, and then that company is suddenly facing backlash because their stuff happened to show up next to that. That's scary for anybody who's trying to balance it. Right, exactly.
That's scary, and it's not fair at all. Because we've seen similar incidents like that happen on, say, YouTube. With its comments features and things like that. Now, more on thevox.com, there's a quote here from a particular advertiser. It says, quote, he, speaking about Elon Musk, he should resign as CEO, stop tweeting, become chair, appoint a board, and put in a governance structure. But the problem is Twitter is now so fundamentally broken that if you got a new CEO, I'm not confident that the CEO will be around for a month. Stability seems to be another big issue as far as advertisers, where they advertise. It makes a big difference knowing who's in place and who's sort of making the boat go where it needs to go. Again, I thought a lot of this was a bit of virtue signaling and just saying, we don't like Elon Musk, so we're not going to advertise. Even though there's a gazillion eyeballs right there and a gazillion potential customers right there on that platform. There was another quote here. It says, there may even be a middle ground. Musk could remain CEO if he publicly backs and commits to a sales leader with gravitas, who commits to a very clear, well-informed standards for advertising on Twitter. Then advertisers will gladly start to return. I'm pretty sure about that. I don't know.
I'm not pretty sure about that.
I don't know because if the new leadership comes in, Musk could still be on the board of directors, right? And a lot of times, board of directors seem to have a lot more power than, say, the CEO of said company. We've seen that not only just at the Silicon Valley companies, but pretty much wherever else. It depends on shareholders and it depends on the board, and what the shareholders want and what the board wants is what the company is going to end up doing. And if Musk is one of the top leaders on the board, I got a hunch his say is still going to matter regardless of who is his chief executive officer. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's because, first of all, if he appoints a CEO, then it's going to be someone who obviously has some sort of personal relationship with him, and that, or, business relationship with him. And so that is, the person is always going to know that Elon is sort of sitting back and having thoughts about it. And then you do wonder how much the CEO is just Elon sort of working through another person, right? It's just proxy Elon
puppetry,
Musk.
Right?
Yeah, puppetry. And so going back to what you were talking about before, these big companies, they don't do advertising budgets and advertising campaigns that are like, on this one day, we're going to spend this amount of money, and then that's their huge budgets, their huge planned out things. And if you have a volatile company that you don't know is going, you invest for, advertising for the next year, and then they're not there in a year, or the stuff has changed so much that nobody's on the platform anymore. And so then the daily active users goes down by so much. Like everything's way too mercurial at Twitter, I think, for anyone to feel like it is worth putting in time and effort, and more importantly for them, money, because they don't know what it's going to look like 3 months down the line. And that's enough to scare any company away, I think.
Yeah. Well, in closing, sir, I'm just going to put this out here. Hey, you folks, if you don't want to advertise on Twitter, I get that. You can advertise on Facebook or Reddit or any of those other platforms. Heck, you can even advertise right here with TWiT and get some awesome host-read ads. And that's all I'm going to say about that, sir.
Beautiful. Yes, you should. Come to TWiT. Up next, researchers have discovered a Wi-Fi security flaw that's been around for quite a while. So we'll take a look at that. Yeah, I was scrolling through the headlines, and I saw this piece from Bleeping Computer talking about a flaw in the 802.11 Wi-Fi protocol standard. So essentially, it's the rules and governance behind how Wi-Fi works, and how Wi-Fi actually sends data from one device to another device, and whether that be, a router to a phone, or a router to a computer, or whatever it happens to be. And what these cybersecurity researchers have determined is that there's something that is at fault in the way that this is all set up. And it's kind of the reason why it's scary is because it is a flaw kind of in the fundament. Very specifically, it is a flaw at the base of what makes up Wi-Fi. So it may be a bit of a tricky thing to fix. We know, and I'll explain what it is in a moment, but I just want to, there are several companies, network devices from Lancome, Aruba, Cisco, Asus, and D-Link. Many of their network devices are at risk from these attacks. Cisco has acknowledged the attack and is going to kind of looking into things to see what's going on there. What's important to understand with this is that while it is concerning, given where the flaw exists, it's not necessarily something that we should all be panicking about, because of the way that data encryption works, and how data encryption that gets passed from device to device is working there. So let's kind of talk about what's going on. So the IEEE 802.11 standard, as part of that standard, there are some methods for power saving, which is great. So, we don't need to have a router or a computer, a laptop constantly. Well, the router probably is constantly running, but the laptop, for example, is not constantly running, doesn't necessarily need to be constantly running. And that's one way that, devices can save power. It's how you get a day's worth of battery life out of a device. And so as part of the Wi-Fi standard, there is a built-in method for these devices to be able to conserve power. And what essentially happens is, let's say a laptop, it goes into sort of sleep mode. It, goes to sleep and locks things down. It sends a bit of data called a frame to the Wi-Fi access point, which could be a router. And it says, hey, I'm going to sleep. And then the router goes, okay, everybody, this laptop's going to sleep. So any data you want us to send to this laptop, I want you all to stand in a line right here, stand in a line right next to me. And all of this data that's meant to be sent gets cached in this line. It's queued, essentially. Now, What happens is that this queued data, when the device wakes up, the laptop goes, oh, okay, it's time I got my power nap in. Then it tells the router, hey, I'm awake now. And then all of those things were queued. They suddenly hop on the stream and get sent to the laptop. That's great. But the problem is the 802.11 standard does not have explicit instructions for how to manage the security of the queued frames. So without explicit instructions, these devices, these Wi-Fi access points, they have to be the ones to either provide instructions for those queued frames. So it's like you, in this sort of metaphor I'm creating, they call in a specialist that it comes from another company, and they stand next to the queue of all of those frames that are waiting in that line, and they say, okay, I need you all to put on Groucho Marx glasses, and I need you all to speak in a different language until you get to your destination. And that way, no one's going to know what you are, who you are, and have any information about what you are. But a lot of these routers are not calling in the specialist because they didn't have the person within the company there that is supposed to be setting up that security. They didn't have their own security guard. They had to call in the specialist to do it. So luckily, some companies do have they did call in the specialist, so to speak. And so those ones are fine. And that's why it's only kind of affecting some. But the other thing that it's affecting is there's no set rules for how long that data can remain queued. Those frames, those people standing in line, they could be there for 5 days, 7 days, 14 days. They got to bring their tents and their outdoor chairs and sit for quite a while. And so because of that, you can have data that is not encrypted, is completely visible, and also is potentially from 7 days ago and you didn't realize it, just there and ripe for the taking. So what happens is an attacker can basically pretend to be the device that has gone to sleep, and it can then send that to the router that, hey, I'm this device, I've woken up, and then get that information to get those bits of data. Now, the reason why I mentioned it's not a super big concern is because a lot of that data just by default is going to be encrypted. And that means that even if they got the data, in fact, I'll just quote directly from the piece. While this attack could be used to snoop on traffic, as most web traffic is encrypted using TLS, there would be a limited impact, meaning that most of that data that's there waiting in the frame buffer is going to have sort of existed in an encrypted state in the first place. So because you're going to an HTTPS site, for example, and when you visit that site, that's already encrypted. So even if it's sitting in the frame buffer, they've already got their Groucho Marx glasses on and they're speaking in a different language. You don't have that concern. Go ahead.
And another thing, like you said, this is really happening at a low level in the I'm trying to remember my network days, OSI model. It's like layer 2 or so, way down in the transfer stack where it's frames. It's not even packets of data yet, it's frames. So this stuff is happening early on.
Yeah. So, and that is kind of part of the one concern is that it's not about, as you're pointing out, getting that data so much as using this as a means to inject malicious content. Yeah. So if the bad actor can spoof the MAC address for that sleeping device, then it can essentially add data into those frames. And then at that point, when it gets to the actual device, then that is included. And then it would take advantage of browser vulnerabilities or some other issue that already exists. So essentially, this isn't one of those flaws where I am gaining direct access to whatever it is I'm trying to get at, because in many cases it's going to be encrypted and it's hard to grab any of that data. This is the crack in the castle's outer wall that will then give the person access to leverage some other issue that exists that will then give them, the information that they want. So I think, again, anytime these kind of big things pop up, you always have that moment of, oh God, this is horrifying. Wi-Fi has a flaw. The protocol has a flaw. Does that mean that I can't use Wi-Fi anymore? What's going on here? And as they point out in the piece as well, it is concerning given its widespread impact, because it's going to affect so many different devices and operating systems. It doesn't matter if it's Linux, if it's iOS, if it's Android, if it's Mac OS. All of these obviously are using the IEEE 802.11 standard when it comes to Wi-Fi communication. And so that on its own, that vulnerability that exists is concerning if you are using one of the devices that doesn't have kind of those extra protections in place. If they didn't hire the specialist, as I was saying earlier.
Now, did any of the manufacturers comment about this flaw, anything that they could do from a patching standpoint?
So Cisco said, hey, we acknowledge the flaw. In fact, and I want to quote again from Bleeping Computer, it says, Cisco admits that the attacks outlined in the paper may be successful against Cisco wireless access point products and Cisco Meraki products with wireless capabilities. But the company says, and I quote, this attack is seen as an opportunistic attack, and the information gained by the attacker would be of minimal value in a securely configured network. So basically what they're saying is, although they could get those frames, there's not a lot that would actually compromise a network overall if there are protections in place. Personally, not my favorite response, because I still think right, I understand, but if there's any leak at all, I'm not too happy about that, right? The company says that they should apply, that firms should apply mitigation measures, including policy enforcement mechanisms, and then they name some of their own products.
Of course.
And then TLS to encrypt data in transit whenever possible, because even then, if the attacker got the data, it of course would be unusable. So yeah, they kind of are going back to what the researchers are saying, which is that a lot of this, because of TLS, it's going to be encrypted anyway. So they just get a bunch of, nonsense data that they can't really use. But on the rare occasion that you are browsing in such a way that it is not encrypted, then yes, that's still of a concern and is a problem for this. So I think this is still too new in terms of its announcement, the fact that this flaw exists for us to see some real responses. But I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some changes. The overall data and research is going to be presented in May at the Black Hat Asia conference. So I think companies are, I would imagine, working on this. I want to mention too, researchers used a set of tools called MacStealer. And MacStealer is essentially using the Mac layer as a means to penetrate networks and look for different flaws that exist. So
media
this is how they
control. Not
Thank you.
Not a Apple system. Media.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Control.
Yeah. Let's be clear. Yes. Not a Mac laptop or computer. So ultimately, Cisco's the only one that seems to have responded yet, and they're kind of like, not a big deal. It's fine. We'll see. Or you can use some of our security products if you want to make sure that this doesn't happen.
Turned it into a sales pitch.
Yeah. Which,
what's fascinating about this though is networking and heck, just cybersecurity. Things change so quickly because everyone has to try to stay ahead of one another. The good guys have to try to stay ahead of the bad actors out there, and vice versa. And things change really, really, really fast as far as different procedures and things that get implemented in place to make things better. I can remember years ago, it was a commonplace to use MAC address filtering to where if you had a Wi-Fi network, the only items allowed to connect to that Wi-Fi network was it had to be on the list of MAC addresses that were allowed, and then that became taboo.
Oh my God,
nope,
yes.
You don't want to do that anymore, but
that was
let's
such
just
a hassle.
think about this. Yeah. But now let's think about this. 802.11 has been around forever. And this is just now being spotted.
Right.
That's crazy.
It is, isn't it?
Crazy.
It's like and I think too, just thinking about every single tiny little layer and tiny little step and tiny little sort of adjustment and branch and these researchers are constantly looking at all of this. And then this is what I find so magnificent about it is you may find it to be this from the outside, this incredibly technical, technical set of skills, but there is a lot of creativity involved here because of the way that you have to think about this. You have to be creative enough to consider how this one area could possibly lead to, 5-6 different other outcomes. And so you have to find a creativity to think outside of the box to try to figure out if there are any potential points of entry or any potential flaws that exist in it's artistic. And I think it's magnificent. The folks, the security researchers who do this, it's just, it's wow.
Mr. Sargent, I have said for years, and on the IT side of things, developers are artists, when it comes to how they put their code together to run efficiently. Two people can create an app, but one person might be able to make it run just a little bit better because they're a little bit more efficient with their code and a little bit more artistic with it. I can say the same thing about network engineers. Network engineers go through so much training to figure out how to route the traffic from here in Petaluma to Santa Rosa to the other side of the globe and have it happen within just milliseconds. That is a skill. And so they can sit back and go through routing tables and go down into the very, very low levels, layer 1, layer 2, and figure things out and how to make things go even better. It's a daggum art. So kudos to these researchers that found this.
Yes, absolute kudos. And with that, I believe it's time to end this episode of Tech News Weekly.
Yeah, man. Tech News Weekly, folks. This awesome news show broadcasts each and every Thursday. So check us out here on twit.tv/TNW. And you can go and subscribe to the show as well. On that link, we have audio and video versions available. So go subscribe right now.
And if you'd like to get every single one of our shows ad-free, well, we've got a way to do that. It's called Club TWiT. Starting at $7 a month or $84 a year, you can join the club. And in doing so, you will be a direct supporter of the network, a direct supporter of this show and all of the shows on the network. And we so appreciate it. With that subscription, you get every single TWiT show ad-free. It's just the content. You also get access to the TWiT Plus bonus feed that has extra stuff you won't find anywhere else behind the scenes, before the show, after the show. Special Club TWiT events are often published there. And you get access to the members-only Discord server. That is a fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club TWiT members and also many of us here at TWiT. All of that for $7 a month, starting at that price at twit.tv/club TWiT. Now, the reason I say starting at that price is because we have heard from folks who've said, hey, I really feel like this club offers so much value, and I think you deserve more than $7 a month. So I'd like to give you more than $7 a month. And we said, well, that's nice of you to say. We can make that happen. So when you go to twit.tv/club TWiT, you'll see that the price starts at $7 a month. But if you want to give more, you are absolutely able to. And we thank you to those of you who have chosen to opt to to provide even more support. Along with those great perks, you also get access to some great shows that are Club TWiT exclusives, including the Untitled Linux Show, which is, as you might imagine, a show all about Linux. You also get access to Paul Thurrott's Hands on Windows program, a short format show where Paul Thurrott walks you through Windows tips and tricks. You get access to my show, Hands on Mac, which is a show where I cover Apple tips and tricks in a short format. So, it won't take up too much of your day. You can kind of go through, find the episodes that really stick out to you, the little tips that you want, and move along home after you're done. And I'm so excited to say that Scott Wilkinson has returned with Home Theater Geeks, which is now a Club TWiT exclusive. So pumped to have Scott Wilkinson there, bringing all of his home theater nerdery and his holly jolly laugh, which just, I don't know, could brighten
the best laugh ever. The best laugh ever, man.
Oh, so good. And as Patrick Delahanty has pointed out, Club TWiT now has a family plan as well. So you might check that out, all at twit.tv/clubtwit. Please consider joining, subscribing, and we thank you to all of you out there who are part of the club. You help to keep things rolling along, and we do appreciate you. If you'd like to follow me online, I'm at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUAHUA.coffee, where I've got links to many of the places I'm most active online. Check me out later today if you're a Club TWiT member for Hands on Mac. You can also check me out on Sundays for Ask the Tech Guys. That is the show where Leo Laporte and I take your questions live on air and do our best to answer those tech questions. It's also kind of a variety show. We have guests on all the time and talk about different tech topics, show off different products. It's a great time. And this Sunday, I'm excited to say that Aunt Pruitt will be joining me for Ask the Tech Guys. We've got some great guests planned for the rest of the start of April while Leo is on vacation. And then also check out on Tuesday, iOS Today, which is the show I co-host with Rosemary Orchard, where we talk all things Apple in a longer format, as opposed to the short format that is Hands on Mac. Aunt Pruitt, tell us about your shows, where people can follow you online, and see us out of this episode.
Sure. You can check out my show, Hands on Photography, right here on TWiT. Just go to twit.tv/HOP for Hands on Photography, and you'll see all of the different episodes and different show notes and the subscription options right there on the page. And as Mr. Sargent previously mentioned, yes, I will be guest hosting this weekend with Mr. Sargent on Ask the Tech Guys. So if you have a burning tech question, send us a video question. Send it to askthetechguys@twit.tv. Via email, and maybe we'll check it out and answer your question on air. And as far as the social media goes, I am @_Pruitt on Twitter and Instagram, as well as on our Mastodon instance, twit.social. I want to give a shout out to our fine support staff there at the studio. Mr. John handling everything in the booth and editing, making us look and sound good each and every week, and just sort of keeping us in line, letting me know I'm talking too much in Slack and I need to shut up so we can move on to the next segment. Thank you so much, sir. You do this so well. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this episode of Tech News Weekly. Thank you all so much for joining. Mr. Sargent, thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for being here. Goodbye, everybody.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, Editor-in-Chief of Ad Astra Magazine, and each week I join with my co-host to bring you This Week in Space, the latest and greatest news from the final frontier. We talk to NASA chiefs, space scientists, engineers, educators, and artists, and sometimes we just shoot the breeze over what's hot and what's not in space, books, and TV. And we do it all for you, our fellow true believers. So whether you're an armchair adventurer or waiting for your turn to grab a slot in Elon's Mars rocket, join us on This Week in Space and be part of the greatest adventure of all time.